Hello, everyone, and welcome to our LinkedIn Live series on the 2020 second half SAP SuccessFactors release. I'm your host, Craig Powers, Managing Editor at Rizing, and this is the second of many H2 2020 release discussions we'll be having over the course of the coming weeks. And I'm very excited to say that today we will be onboarding you to the latest updates in SuccessFactors onboarding. Haha, very funny. A few housekeeping notes as a reminder. With so many people working from home, bandwidth might be stretched. If there are issues with the stream, hold tight and we'll get it back online as fast as possible. In our onboarding discussion, we'll be covering primarily what you probably know as Onboarding 2.0, which SAP is now just calling onboarding. And we'll also touch on some of the updates to Onboarding 1.0 and maybe answer any questions you might have about that. But there really aren't that many this time around. 2.0 is clearly becoming the future there. So grab a drink and I'll let you decide which one depending on what time zone you're in. And let's get going with our panelists. So first, today, we're happy to have Leanne Zabriskie. She's our practice director for professional services. Welcome, Leanne. How are you doing today?
I'm great. Thanks, Craig.
Oh, sorry, talent. Talent, I missed that part. Talent specifically. Yeah, so are you excited to work with the other person that we have today? I know he can be a little overbearing sometimes.
I am hoping I can live up to expectations.
Okay, so I guess we can bring him in. Stop just talking trash about him and bring him on. Now let me introduce the legend. I think our most frequent panelist on this. He just can't stay away. Lorne Kurtz, a service manager for AMS. So welcome back, Lorne, and I'm loving the bow tie.
Thank you, Craig. Again, I'm happy to be invited back for a second time round. Obviously, somebody enjoyed either it was the jacket or whatever else I've kind of put on the show that I was invited back a second time. But I will say I didn't realize that we were going to be so close together. You know, I know we kind of have to be 6 feet apart, so I'm going to mask up. At least for this, just better safe than sorry.
The mask is sparkly too. I didn't know that we were going formal dress code, but
it matches the bow tie. So I had to, when you don't have to worry about socks and shoes matching whatever else you can wear out there, you just got to match the mask to your ensemble. So we'll go with that one. But yeah, no, again, I'm very excited to be here with my new partner, Leanne. And again, I'm excited to kind of let her really lead off on what you were saying with onboarding 2.0, and I'm still here with the onboarding 1.0 kind of legacy news, and just really share what the H2 release had in store.
Yeah, so as you said, I'll turn it over to you guys and go on with onboarding.
Of course, thank you. So again, as I kind of just said, Leanne is here as our new onboarding 2.0 expert, and I'm really learning a lot with you, Leanne. I know that we have to be onboarding 2.0 certified. You got to be EC certified now.
Yep.
And, a lot of new North American clients potentially aren't there yet on 2.0, but they're really interested in hearing about it. And so, Craig really went into the branding of it, but, what's kind of your terminology on how it's going to be dictated, let's say, through SAP to our clients?
Yeah, and I think most of us are still referring to the products as onboarding 1.0 or 1.0 and onboarding 2.0. And I think we'll probably continue that, casually for a while.
Yep.
But SAP is really trying to rebrand the products. So what we call onboarding 2.0, the new version is onboarding. And the other legacy version they're referring to as onboarding 1.0. I think that makes sense. If we look forward into the future when we are all using the new product, it'll be onboarding, right? So the new product is onboarding, but we will probably be using those terms interchangeably. So onboarding 2.0 is the new version of onboarding. Onboarding 1.0 is the legacy version that we've all known and loved for so long now.
Yeah, and I know that's an important call out, especially with the new What's New viewer, which is an amazing tool that SAP has come out with.
Mm-hmm.
They do split it into onboarding and onboarding 1.0, onboarding 1.0 out there. And so, just to make sure everybody is aware of it, the onboarding tab alone or within the module feature is just in regards to onboarding 2.0, whereas it specifically has to be called out for onboarding 1.0. There are some like EC and platform releases that interchangeable with both of those as well. But again, just kind of that service reminder of onboarding, onboarding 1.0 now moving forward.
Yep. And then just be forgiving of the rest of us as we still are referring to it as 2.0. Again, just to distinguish it from the two products that we're still working with. Yep.
We'll get there. Hey, look,
Yep.
we still call it RMK and CSB and all of that, and it's been a couple of years too, right? So it's the engine that drove us all to where we are today, and just we don't want to let go all the time.
Yep.
So in regards to onboarding, what are really the big compliance changes that are coming out with it?
Well, this is a big release. So, this product has been rolling along for a couple of releases now. We've all been getting our feet wet with it and getting used to it, but we've all been kind of waiting for it to really have parity with Onboarding 1.0. And this release is big. So the biggest changes are the compliance features. There have been a couple of compliance forms released in the past for UK and Australia. I believe are the only two countries that were covered. And we've, especially here in North America, really been waiting for US and Canada.
Yep.
This release has all of the US state compliance forms. So when you compare it to past releases where there were one or two forms, and now there are all of the forms necessary for 50 states, not only is it an important release for North American compliance, but it's also important because we could see the tremendous volume of new release features that they did develop and roll out. There are a couple of things that are still missing that we're still waiting for, and those are some of the I-9 and W-4 E-Verify integrations and functionality. So I-9 and E-Verify were not rolled out on a global basis. There's some functionality that's available, some that's not, some that's still in a early adopter or trial sort of status. So what I would say is keep an eye on the What's New viewer. Sometimes features are added in between releases, but right now it looks like that's going to be in the spring release, so early 2021.
So in terms of kind of, the biggest feature of onboarding 1.0 is the compliance functionality for Canada and for the US. Majority of our clients that I know that we support utilize the state withholding forms, as you said, and those have gone over. They utilize, in the US, let's start there, state compliance forms, those have gone over. I-9, you said, some of it has gone over. Section 1 and 2, not re-verification. They utilize E-Verify, hasn't gone over. Canada does all the province forms and all that. So knowing kind of what's still out there for 1.0 and what still is being updated every release, as we saw in the 1H 2020 release with all the compliance features versus what's available in 2.0 now, what's kind of like a strategic way of getting clients starting to think about, the roadmap and what's coming in 2021 with what they might have from a country perspective to where they eventually want to get to, but knowing potentially the current limitations strictly from a compliance perspective.
Yeah, and that's another reason that I'm looking at the volume of material and the volume of updates that were released with this fall release, because they did develop so many compliance forms and have all of that available. So that just gives me confidence that they really will be able to meet those goals of having all of the compliance functionality for North America rolled out in the first half of 2021. That's never guaranteed until the release is actually rolled out, but it gives me confidence. So I do feel like our clients can start looking forward to the two products, Onboarding 1.0 and Onboarding 2.0, having parity. So if you're currently a 1.0 customer looking at when you would go to 2.0, I think now's the time. Start looking at that roadmap. And if you're looking at rolling out 2.0, it's an implementation process. So by the time you get your team set up to start the implementation, start collecting requirements, start testing 2.0 functionality, and get ready to go live with it, that's a few months, in process typically. And then you'd be looking right around that time frame for the first half release, which is when North America compliance is supposed to be out. So I think now is the time to start looking at that, and have your forms and everything ready to go and be ready to roll when all of that compliance is available. Now, we do have a lot of customers that are not necessarily coming from 1.0. They might be coming from another product, or they might not have an onboarding solution. And again, if you're looking at implementing an onboarding solution, we're starting to really endorse 2.0 as the way to go. And again, if you start that implementation process, you're going to be in good shape when that first half release comes out. If you have another vendor right now or another process in place that you're using for things like E-Verify, you could probably continue using that for the cutover period and be ready to go when it's released through SuccessFactors in the spring.
Makes sense. And kind of, you were talking about the differences of vendors and everything like that. And, I know it was mentioned in the 1H release and with time and testing and our demos and clients. Just again, a call out to everybody that's out there is you do not need Employee Central to deploy Onboarding 2.0, right? That was a major release feature in 1H 2020 that they've really strengthened on. We've seen it done with and without it, and it really does open that availability to all of those kind of HRIS opportunities out there.
And you don't need recruiting management either.
There you go.
So Onboarding 2.0 can stand alone. Of course, it's designed to work with EC because we see more and more customers going to EC. And if you have Employee Central, it's going to use the data that you've already built into the system. It's going to use the foundations and the tables and the structure and everything that you've already got. So it gives you really nice, consistent data. But if you don't have EC, you don't have recruiting management, it does stand alone.
Yep. And again, I love that's what SAP has done recently, and not just right now, but they've been thinking about the flexibility of their products over the many, many years, is they understand that the kind of model has moved away from an all-in-one kind of encompassing model, from recruiting to onboarding to the HRIS to really whatever is out there at the time, and really clients can piecemeal it all together and take the time to deliver one and then go and deliver the other one while they're still on their legacy programs and slowly roll it out, versus doing that big bang, we need to use all of the one product, right? And not only is that just between onboarding or SAP SuccessFactors amongst other vendors, they're also doing that within themselves, right? We're talking about how you can have onboarding 2.0 for some and onboarding 1.0 for others, and kind of trade off like that. And that's inclusive. I'll let you kind of talk about it. There's not just onboarding. I know we classify the model as onboarding, but there's crossboarding and there's offboarding as well. Can you talk a little bit about kind of that coherent nature?
Yep. So within either one of the products, you certainly can do crossboarding or offboarding as well. So we do consider it all part of onboarding. Onboarding is the module. We implement onboarding functionality, but within that, there's processes. So you have an onboarding process, a crossboarding process, an offboarding process. And so that allows you to, for example, crossboarding, if somebody takes a new job, they can fill out all the right paperwork for that new job and still be compliant, just like they would if they were a new hire. So it does serve all of those functions in either onboarding 1.0 or 2.0. Of course, the functionality differs. But something that is different about this release of this new product that I haven't seen in other SAP releases is that the two products can coexist. So if you're thinking about trying out Onboarding 2.0, or you want to move towards 2.0, but you're not quite ready to take that leap until US compliance is fully built out, or Canadian compliance is released, or some other, milestone, you could start, right? So you could, for example, right now, start rolling out 2.0 for the UK or Australia, where they have compliance forms available, and then bring on other countries as they come up to parity. The two products can coexist, and I really like that SAP has offered that, because it does let you ease into it a little bit.
Of course. And, you mentioned earlier, and I kind of was toting about the what's new viewer and everything like that. And I think, you were talking about all these updates and making sure of, potentially what's going to come out in the production release that's going live next weekend versus when the test release came out, and just more updates that came out for onboarding 2.0 is that it came out with one set of documentation, and then a week after it kind of changed a little bit. Do you want to speak a little bit more, kind of what's your, best practices on that what's new viewer, and keep checking it?
Keep checking it is the best practice. Yeah. I know we were updating documentation and looking at the what's new viewer just a couple of days before the release. And at that point, there was still some things included that actually did not make it into the release. So my advice is keep checking it. On the day of the release is when we finally found out that the full I-9 and E-Verify functionality would not be available this fall. So that was on the day of the release that they shared that information in the What's New viewer. And then there was some additional documentation and details added even after the release. So yeah, keep the What's New viewer up, and just keep tabs on it.
And, I know with every kind of release, there's always little bugs that are found out, and it's great that SAP has kind of given us that timeline between the test environment and the production environment, and ask clients and professional services, vendors, everybody themselves to go out there and test everything. And so outside of the What's New viewer, just kind of public announcement is there's also KBA out there for all the known bugs for all the H2 2020 releases. And so again, make sure you're checking all of that. Help on the community boards, help on just on the sessions, on the weekly sessions that SAP Production Services put out there for all those bugs, and we can kind of work towards getting a stabilized production release, because that's really what it's for.
Yeah, exactly.
So, so in terms of kind of just other things, the compliance changes we were talking about, that was the biggest, and I agree, for Canada and US. What else is kind of out there for this release?
There's a few other things. So, I did talk about compliance changes with regard to forms, but I also want to mention that with regard to process. So now there are capabilities to have process variants, as we would have known them with the legacy onboarding functionality, but essentially within your process, you can trigger compliance forms for different countries or states, and you can put that into your document collection process now. So it's just not only making those forms available, but making it work in the Onboarding 2.0 process. So that is now available. I think in the past, when there were just a couple of compliance forms available, they had to be worked into the process manually. It was a customization. And so now that functionality is available. Another thing is data privacy and protection. So that data privacy and protection, especially for our friends who are responsible for GDPR, is a big concern, right? I know some countries have a lot more data privacy concerns than others. But it is available now. Now, the one caveat there is that if you're using the U.S. compliance forms, they recommend that you not turn on the data privacy and audit, the purge and audit. Okay, so the data privacy statements and things like that can be used, but purging documents is not recommended if you are using U.S. compliance forms, because it will purge your compliance forms. And really the whole point of those is to keep those records, right?
Of course.
So just be very cautious in turning on purge.
Of course, and there's different retention rules per country, per state, per province, and everything like that. And if I've heard it correctly, I think it's just, the retention rules for the US have just not kind of been binded together yet. And therefore, when you're trying to do one thing for one area, country, whatever it might be, as you just said, you don't want to purge out your US ones, and just those retention rules haven't been customized or individualized yet for the United States.
Yeah, and again, just watch the What's New viewer. I would expect that as they roll out the rest of I-9 and E-Verify and Canadian compliance and all those other things in the spring, that perhaps that'll be updated too and really ready for prime time.
Yeah, and look, we know that there's always kind of little enhancements nowadays, that they're only down to 2 halves instead of what they were doing in 2019 as to 4 quarters. Right. And so there might be, quote unquote, an emergency patch, as we like to label it, or just an enhancement release on one of the weekends. And so like you said, just stay out there to the What's New viewer, the community boards, and just see it. If that's really important, that you're on Onboarding 2.0, you are releasing the state withholding forms, the I-9 withholding forms, and you're looking kind of for those retention rules sooner than later. Or
if you're in the implementation process. I know that we have more clients right now looking at implementing or starting that implementation process rather than actually live with Onboarding 2.0. So yeah, even if you're in the implementation process, keep an eye on that, because those are things that you might want to start testing.
Awesome. So I think we might have some questions out on kind of the Jamboard. So Craig, anything out there for us?
Yeah, so we obviously we made the event ahead of time, and because of that, we had some people submit some questions ahead of time. I think you probably have heard these from your customers as well. The first one, were there any updates to business rules capability in this release?
There were. Business rules for event reasons no longer need custom fields from recruiting. So if you're integrating recruiting management to onboarding, in the past, we had to create custom fields in recruiting that were just meant to trigger certain events in onboarding, certain forms or things like that. And that's not needed anymore. So once again, the moral of that story is Onboarding 2.0 can just stand alone better than it could in the past. If you are integrating it with recruiting, that's fine. Of course, it still works very well, but you don't need those custom fields created just for onboarding anymore.
And so, that also takes out manual intervention, it sounds like, as well. Is that it sounded like it had to be kind of manually selected from recruiting as a new hire or a transfer or anything like that. And I know there are business rules out there with recruiting that sometimes work, sometimes don't, but they could always be overwritten. And so it sounds like you're now removing that manual process, and whenever we can make the system do the work for us and guarantee it off of XYZ values, it's
not rely on a person to remember to check the right box, right? That's why you want a great system, so you don't have to rely on somebody remembering to do something.
We all know that a little too well sometimes.
Yep.
Awesome.
Great. So, Lorne, there's another question I think probably be better to ask after you might answer it in the course of what you're going to talk about, and then so I'll come back later and check in with you.
Thank you.
So we've spent a lot of time talking about 2.0, that is the way of the future, but we can't forget about our good old 1.0 product that has been tried and true. Lorne, tell us a little bit about what's new with 1.0 this go round.
Yeah, so as we kind of said at the start, it is definitely a smaller release, but we expected it, right? Is that all the compliance functionality that is extremely important that is still baked in to Onboarding 1.0 came out in the 1H release. There wasn't many compliance changes in the middle of 2020. But there were the one that is big out there for our US compliance I-9 users is you can now update somebody's social security number during the hiring process. So if they marked it during that initial entry of I do not have my SSN, I'm in the process, I've applied for it, here's my application number, here's my application date. There's standard functionality in onboarding, so you don't need professional services. You go into the settings, you enable it, and then it triggers an email that invites them back into the system to solely update the I-9 panels. And so while they go through it the first time and they will sign off on the first I-9 that says they've applied for it, if they update the second I-9, so perfect example, right? I am being offered a job on, what day is it today? On November 17th. I'm updating it on November 17th, and I'm going to start on November 31st. I applied for my SSN on November 1st, and come November 20th, I get it. I get that email from the system now. I click on the link, and I can go in there, and I can update my SSN that I've now retrieved on November 21st. And then on November 30th, when I come in for my day, for section 2, you're signing off on the updated I-9 form with the SSN in there. So it takes out all that manual intervention of remembering, hey, when you get your SSN, you got to update the form, you got to reload it into Document Center, you got to manually wet paper sign it and all that. So it's a small one because I believe from, the amount of hiring that you're doing that does not have a social security number is small. But as we kind of said earlier, anytime you get an opportunity to take away manual processes, paper processes out of this digital technical system, why not take advantage of it? There's a click of a button, a couple of emails that go out, and then boom, it's there for your users to kind of enjoy and utilize. And again, your hiring managers or your orientation managers or HR managers, whoever's conducting those I-9 Section 2 will thank you for it.
Yeah, anytime they don't have to remember to do something, right? Isn't that the point of having an onboarding system, is that it does it all in one place? So, we've talked a lot about, especially with 2.0, how it's really built for Employee Central, can stand alone, but is intended to use the same data as Employee Central. But what about 1.0? Are there any updates for users who have Employee Central?
Yeah, so they've enhanced really what they did on the last release. And so on the last release, they came out with the enhanced manage pending hires functionality. It's a nicer kind of view. It has filters, it has searchable filters, but there was a couple of, really important items that were missing when you are included with recruiting or potentially without recruiting, one for recruiting, one for out. And so if you're with recruiting, you can now include the rec ID in that managed pending hires view. And then with or without it, you could also include the request date. So not only is there the start date, but also the request date of when it came into managed pending hires. Again, the more we can filter on in that tool, the easier it is. I know we have a lot of high volume clients that you are really seeing hundreds and pages worth of MPH records in there that potentially are being hired well down the line. So the more tools we can give to filter it, it's great.
Yep, absolutely. And one of the things that a lot of customers really liked about 1.0 is the employee portal. So the new hire experience. So what's changing there?
So lucky for all of us, we have a special correspondent going to come in here and tell us just about that. Hey, Dresden, you're on mute.
Dresden, you're muted.
You're muted.
The new kid. So I do have an announcement for you guys. If you are currently using the new employee portal, the new hire portal, something is changing in there. One of the big changes is that Flash is going to be depreciated at the end of this year, in December of 2020. So that means that a lot of platforms who are currently utilizing Flash are having to find a new way to do the thing that they did. Now, with this release, the big change is that if you are using embedded video with Flash, you are now going to have to switch over to using a third-party embedded directly from the source, so directly from YouTube or Vimeo. Or what we recommend you do is just go ahead and make the jump to using a new tool, a tool that you probably already have in your SuccessFactors suite, a tool called Jam. Jam is amazing. It's a fantastic place for you to have and establish your new employee content. It's incredibly user-friendly. It's super easy to use a template that's already there, that SAP has a lot of templates at your disposal, and then you can make it your own. You don't have to stop there with just having it as your new employee group. You can also make it an internal marketing or corporate communications platform for your entire company. So obviously Jam is my jam. I'm super into it. And if anyone has direct questions about Jam or wants to know more about why we think it's awesome over the new employee portal, I'm happy to be your go-to gal.
I have one question.
Oh, just the one?
Just one. Can I be your peanut butter to your jam?
You can. I think that's great.
I feel a little left out.
You could be like
the bread.
I was gonna say the fancy.
Yeah,
thing.
hold it all together.
Yes, exactly.
But one point I wanted to bring up there is that the Jam portal or new hire experience, however you want to build it with Jam, can be used with Onboarding 2.0. Right. So if you're, now looking at bringing a new hire experience to Jam, and if you're a 1.0 customer looking at converting to 2.0, it's not going to be throwaway work. Right. It could be an experience that you could reuse with your 2.0 process and really helps you bring those new hires in and have a great experience kind of built on top of the functionality of paperwork.
And one of the great features about Jam, I will say, having worked with a lot of folks building out their new employee portal, the admin friendliness of the new employee portal, it's just not there. It's not something that's necessarily intuitive for folks. Training sometimes can be quite intense. I will say that is not what we've experienced with getting folks up to speed on Jam. It's one of those things where we show them just really quickly how to use the widgets and how to move things around. And within just 20 minutes, they're already making changes and owning the tool. So if you're looking for something that is going to be super straightforward for your team, Jam is great.
Keep it simple.
Yep.
Awesome. Well, Dresden, thank you so much for joining us. It's always a pleasure to have you on these calls. And so hopefully we'll have you back soon.
Thanks for having me. Bye, guys.
Thanks for stopping by. And I think that was all for 1.0. Lorne, was there anything else that you wanted to highlight, or are we ready for Craig to rejoin us?
Yeah, that's it. Kind of from the release, those are really the major items. So unless there's any questions out there, so Craig.
Yeah, there was a question in the comments. We see your question. We're going to reach out to you afterwards and get that answer for you. We'll get that for you. But I did have another question that was submitted before, and it has to do with 1.0, and a pretty big one. Has there been any communications regarding the sunsetting of onboarding 1.0?
Not that I've heard. Leanne, have you heard anything on it?
No, they've been saying since the initial release of 2.0 that 1.0 will eventually be sunset, but they haven't put a date on it. And what we've seen from previous products is there's usually lots of advance notice. So I wouldn't start getting too concerned about it yet. I think it's it's good to have that on the to-do list for future planning, but I still think we have some time.
I agree. And again, just based on communications of what we've been seeing with the functionality of them building in the flexibility of having 2.0 and 1.0 being able to run on the same system, it doesn't seem like it's any time coming. And again, from previous experiences with modules and tools that they have completely sunsetted, they've regularly given at least 2 to 3 years.
Yeah.
Even like post the sunset date. So they say it's sunsetting and then you kind of got 2 years.
Extensions,
and again, they go over. And again, I know when 2.0 first came out, one of the first questions from us here at Rizing to SAP was, well, what are you going to be doing about those who are on 1.0 and want to transition over to 2.0? So not a full rebuild, but just kind of want to do a lift and shift. And SAP said, you know what, it's on our roadmap, but it's about 24 months down the line. And so really hearing that kind of alludes up, we're only a year after it. So we got at least another year until they're working on those transition plans. And if they're going to sunset it, they're going to probably help clients as best as possible. Yep. And so you got to have that kind of transition plan, that quick, easy lift and shift developed at that time. But
well, yes and no. If you've been live with 1.0 for a while, it might be a good time to look at your processes,
sure.
Right? So I'm not a fan of lift and shift, because to me that's saying take exactly what we had and put it over there. And I think you can usually learn from your experience, right? So, which forms don't get filled out properly, or which process do hiring managers hate? And look back at what you've been doing and think about how you could make it better when you implement 2.0 and, revise those processes rather than just re-implementing exactly what you have.
So I will say, when these COVID restrictions lift, I will bring you over into Toronto, over the border here, and you're going to redesign my office and not just lift and shift it for me.
When you were talking about a new hire starting on November 31st, I was getting ready to send you a calendar to go back there, because
I thought I said the 30th, but okay, fair enough. I'll trust you on that. I got to go get my little kids advocates and start counting the days again one by one.
Yeah.
Awesome.
But, looking at the planning for implementation of 2.0 or coming off of 1.0, or should you be implementing a new onboarding product right now, I think the moral of the story is 2.0 is getting ready for prime time, right? It's just about there. 1.0 is still an incredibly viable option that's not going anywhere for a little while. If you're looking at making the move, I think 2.0 is a good product now, especially if you're an EC customer, because you have that foundation of solid data. That's what you really want. That's what it's all about. If you're a new customer who doesn't have an onboarding solution right now, I'd go with the new version, because why implement something that's going to be going away eventually, even if it's not immediately? So I think it's a good time to start planning. And I think as far as SAP coming out with some sort of lift and shift tool, I like that they have the coexistence of the two right now. I think that that's a good first step in being able to transition smoothly.
Makes sense. And again, I love it how you're saying it. I think you should go kind of market for SAP on that in the prime time, right? Go get Tony Romo out there to do some of the Monday night broadcasts for them.
No. I'm going to go old school there. If you're going prime time, we need Dion.
We'll take that one. Yeah, take it down for the touchdown. Agreed.
Yep, exactly.
Awesome. Craig, anything else?
No other questions. I gotta say, the sun came out over here, so I don't know if it was the weather or if you guys have brightened my day.
Leanne's bright smile.
Maybe it was Dresden who, I thought we were just doing onboarding. Dresden comes in, starts talking about SAP Jam. My mind is blown. My day is brighter. But again, so I gotta thank you both for joining us. It was fun as always, Lorne and Leanne. You fit right in, I think. So that was great. And then Dresden popping in with your great intro video too. So that was a lot of fun. But yeah, so again, I appreciate both of you coming on. We'll have more of these tomorrow. We actually at the same time, 5 p.m. Eastern, 2 p.m. Pacific, we'll have Learning. So we'll have more people on for SuccessFactors Learning, the LMS, as we all like to call it. So I'll remind you that you can find the whole schedule to all our Rizing HCM LinkedIn live series on our LinkedIn page. And you can also check out the Rizing blog for expanded analysis. Not that you can really truly expand on what we've talked about here, but you can get more on our blog for the H220 release at H2 2020 release. We actually dropped Val dropped in the comments the link to our onboarding blog. So if that's all from you guys, again, I appreciate it. And we'll be back tomorrow with more.
Thanks for hosting, Craig. It's been great. Thanks
everyone. Have a great
All right. See you next time.